podcast of the PPO, podcast about everything from the world of public procurement.
Dear listeners, welcome to Public Procurement Office podcast. It is my honor to talk today with Mrs. Désirée Klinger from St. Gallen University in Switzerland. Mrs. Professor, could you please introduce yourself and what is your specialization in public procurement?
Thank you so much for having me here, Petra. It is really an honor and pleasure. Thank you for the invitation. Yes, I'm assistant professor of public law at the University of St. Gallen in Switzerland. And I'm recently also the managing editor of a journal that we might discuss a little later. That's the journal on European public procurement. And the focus of my public procurement expertise, it's rather broad. I'm really fascinated by this topic. I do a lot of empirical legal analysis, so I like to work with data. I like to understand what the implications are, and I work with the database TED, for example, Tenders Electronic Daily. We have something similar in Switzerland to see, like, for example, what factors impact the uptake of sustainable procurement. And more recently, I also have a lot of requests from practice, and I do a lot of research in procurement of AI systems and how potentially AI systems will change procurement procedures.
How will they change the procurement procedures? Let me give you one example. I had here guests from Poland, and they were very strictly against any AI in the system because of the potential hallucination. However, another guest from different countries very welcome this update. It is just still such a brand new topic that nobody exactly knows. So could you please tell us more insights?
I would like to tell you more, but we don't know exactly. It's also not applied in Switzerland yet. We are at the stage of buying it, these systems, procuring it, but for usually other purposes within the administration. We have a lot of initiatives that look into AI systems to help, for example, with construction permitting, with taxation. So it's like administrative procedures, and someone needs to buy those tools, those AI systems. So there is where public procurement comes in. But the other question, the other side of the coin is like, how does it change the public procurement procedure once it's there? And we are not that far yet in Switzerland, so we don't have any practice reports. But I think, it can certainly be used for summaries. Yeah, we have enormous documents, loads of documents, requirements that need to be reviewed, also in the review procedure. But in Switzerland, we have a very strong view on having a human in the loop. I think having an AI decision or an AI making decisions will probably not be possible. Also, legally speaking, not, because we have review procedures where a human needs to give reasons why they, for example, reject a tender or not. And an AI system, as we all know, is a little bit of the problem of the black box problem. That might change technologically. I don't know. But the legal reasoning aspect is a problem. And as you mentioned, the data bias. So I think even in other administrative procedures where they are looking into applying AI, they think very carefully on what kind of data they want to train the systems. If you're training on the entire corpus, you have mistakes in there, you have probably biases in there that might replicate. If you choose precedents, like specific model cases that you like, you can avoid that, but it doesn't reflect practice as it has been lived until then. So there's a lot of questions and unfortunately no clear answers.
I totally understand. As you were speaking, immediately in my mind went like, oh, come on, exactly, like the law is written by the people and it can be changed in a time. It is not like the science that is given. So what was actually legal or maybe 5 years ago might not be legal anymore, and exactly then how to train these systems, it is really so difficult. So it is very interesting. Do you do some research on this topic at this moment, like to try actually how this could truly, these tools, how they could truly work?
I actually do, yeah. I'm working on a project on legal reasoning And I use large language models to make the reasoning observable. So I use it as a method, as an observing tool. I do it based on Swiss Supreme Court data or decisions and federal administrative court decisions. And I look into what kind of like reasoning interpretation they used. I look specifically into public law. And one big question that everybody's asking is like, if we have this current data and we would let AI replicate or run based on that data, would they just stay within that realm? Or because it's prediction based, would it go beyond that and make a prediction outside of, so to say, the corpus that we have, basically predicting or solving a case that has not been solved based on likelihood estimations.
And what are your findings so far?
My findings so far are like working or cleaning the data. I don't have any findings. I'll let you know. The summary is planned for that. Annotating decisions, court decisions, very specifically, so for the system to train it in classifying different arguments. And I'm working together with a machine learning expert on that.
Sounds really very interesting, I have to say. So what would you like are the main differences between Swiss procurement processes and, let's say, European? Switzerland is not part of the European Union, but I would be really interested in what extent actually you are inspired by the European law, or maybe vice versa. Can you please tell us more?
They both have a common denominator, which is the WTO Government Procurement Agreement. So that sets the baseline for both of them, EU and Swiss law. And true, we are not part of the EU. We have, although also a public procurement agreement with the EU, where we coordinate certain agreements in addition to the GPA. And what we also know and often have is so-called autonomous adoption of law. We haven't done that, or we didn't need to do it with the EU procurement rules because the WTO GPA was regulating so many standards. I mean, the GPA says a lot about non-discrimination, equal treatment, and transparency, the different procedures. So I feel based on that denominator, the rules in the EU and Switzerland are actually pretty close and comparable. And so there's actually not that many difference, with one big exception, and that's that the EU has around 50 sectorial rules surrounding EU public procurement law. We don't have that. It's much simpler.
Let me please ask you, so in the European level, the regulation is like the most important legal document, and then comes exactly the sectoral legislative, and then our own law, like the state law. So how is it with the GPA in Switzerland? What is the most important legal document in the procurement processes?
We've ratified the GPA and we transformed it into national law. So it's the Swiss Public Procurement Act. And actually, it's not exactly the same structure as the EU Procurement Directive, but it covers it is very, very similar in what it covers. Like the whole question of what procedures exist. We have the open procedure, the selective procedure, that is the restricted procedure. So sometimes terminology is slightly different, but it's very similar with direct awards. We do not have the innovation partnership. We have not adopted that one.
Why?
I think what we often do is waiting to see how it plays out in the EU.
Very clever.
And we know now it's not being used very, very often, the innovation partnership. And I think another reason is also that we have enough measures or means to deal with innovation. Dialogue, we have integrated or adopted the dialogue that allows for that. And so there was not, I think there was no, they didn't see a need, so to say, to adopt that. But that doesn't mean that we are doing great with innovation procurement in Switzerland. That's like part of my research. I look at the data and look, for example, how much innovation based on the tender data has been produced. And you can never estimate, that's a big but in public procurement, we usually don't have the contracts, how they performed at the end. We don't have transparency on that, right? We have transparency on the award data, but not on, how has the contract been concluded? So within that limitation that we can look at how innovative have tenders been, for example, or did they require innovation criteria? There was one tender within 10,000 tenders in construction and engineering services that had an innovation criteria.
Let me ask you, please, what do you consider to be innovation? Because, for example, in the European funding, where innovation is also needed, everything new is innovation. In another scope of, related to this topic, someone else gives different criteria for innovation. What are your criteria for innovation?
That is very unspecific. I agree with you. Also in Swiss law, it's very similar to the EU. I think when I did research, I was looking into there's process innovation and product innovation. Process innovation is if a process is more innovative and more efficient, for example. Product innovation can also be eco-innovation. But there's no clear definition of what is really innovation. What we definitely cannot do, and what I struggled a lot with when I did empirical analysis, is like relying on patents. Literally nothing in EU public procurement or in public procurement is patentable. It doesn't reach that novelty threshold. So then it becomes like, what's innovation? And I think a lot of interpretation for innovation in Switzerland was that efficient energy use, that was understood as part of innovation. I also believe that AI systems, the procurement of it, is understood as innovation. But there's really not a good or clear definition of what innovation is.
What about the cases that are ruled by the European High Court, CJEU?
Yeah.
Yes, for example, when they rule out some ruling regarding the public procurement, like this very famous calling case, for example, that we had recently, and completely changed actually the way now European Union is looking, let's say, for the third countries. How do you cope this also in your system, or this you just leave as they said it, or?
You mean if you have a court that is reviewing public procurement?
No. What I mean is if you are also bounded by this finding, because, for example,
by the CJEU finding?
Exactly.
No, we're not.
No,
Switzerland is not bound by that.
I know, because when you are adopting and inspired by many of these rules that are actually in the European Union, and the principles are more or less the same. Right. I was very much interested. Okay, so what about the court ruling?
No, that's not part of. We haven't agreed to adopt any of that corpus. So what we have is we have a Swiss Federal Administrative Court that reviews procurement decisions that have happened at the federal level. We also have the complication, as probably many countries, that we have regions. We have 26 regions.
We have 3,000 municipalities.
And we have about 2,000 municipalities, and between that is our 26 regions. And so each region has its own law, but we have a so-called intercantonal agreement that also sets the minimum standards of how public procurement should be regulated.
Each region has different rules, each law, as you said. Did I hear correctly?
They adopt their own laws, but they adopt it now based on an intercantonal agreement that sets the baseline. Similar to that, we could compare it like the WTO GPA and how all the countries and parties and members have adopted that law in large degree into the national laws. We have that also at the regional level, basically.
So how do you then see, or what is your policy towards these third countries? Are you like European Union used to be, so very open market to everybody? Or were you more like selective in the process? Were you able to put the selection criteria in the selection process?
We stick very closely to the WTO GPA, which means you should not discriminate against any foreign supplier.
Exactly.
We don't have any Swissness criterion. I've been asked that a lot recently by the media. Below the threshold, fine, but above the threshold, we don't have any Swissness criteria. You cannot preference national suppliers.
What is the future? What do you think will be the future? Because right now we know that on the European level, actually they are trying to put some label or some criteria, some specification. What is European product? Is it created in European Union? Is it put together in European Union? Is it bought in European Union? We still don't know the answer at this moment, but we definitely see that these things are going to be changing. What will Switzerland do in this case?
Yeah, I wrote an article, a brief one, in this journal that I mentioned at the beginning, Buy American, Buy European, Buy Swiss, ? My answer is please don't do Buy Swiss because we're too small of a market to have a domestic preference policy in place to the degree that the US or potentially the EU might have. Our hope is that Switzerland will be considered European when it comes to Buy European. There has been a communication in June 2025 by the EFTA subcommittee that asked that any future Buy European preferences would be extended to the 30 EEA countries, but not to the EFTA countries. And the only distinction between EEA and EFTA is Switzerland. So that would mean, for us then the question was is Switzerland not included? But now we have the proposed Industrial Accelerator Act that says if there's any access agreement like the GPA, it is considered of EU origin. So we are in the GPA, and I think if that is adopted like it is proposed right now, we would qualify as EU origin. Although I think there might be a lot of changes because it still needs to go through the parliamentary process.
I am still curious, why do you think not even this potential probability do you think should not be covered in the law? Because it doesn't have to be mandatory to use this Swiss criteria, but isn't it good in your opinion just to have this as an option?
Well, I don't think it would be compatible with the WTO GPA if it's above the threshold. And I'm not sure if Buy European would be. And I definitely think it's Buy American is not compatible with WTO law. But what we do see in the Federal Acquisition Regulation, that's the U.S. regulation, they basically say that these Buy American rules do not apply in the scope of the WTO GPA. So they take it back, so to say, and let the WTO GPA run, because that would be the non-discrimination criterion.
I totally understand, but anything can be changed. Any regulation, any contract, it's made by a man, as we mentioned before. So I was maybe more asking about your personal preference, if you really think this is too big, harming in the rules that we are so much used to, in these principles that we always used in the public procurement processes.
I think it might hold true for the EU to change something like this. We see proposals and movements. I think for an island country, like an island within the EU, so to say, as Switzerland, I think I would recommend against doing Buy Swiss, because even if you do optional, you would be contrary to the GPA. And I think as for now, we don't change the GPA, right? So anything we do, be it on EU level or national level, would be incompatible. And we could say, okay, it's fine, we accept that we are incompatible with the GPA. I mean, the WTO system effectively broke down when the panel was not able to litigate anymore at the international trade level. So one could say, we willingly accept that we are in breach of the GPA, so to say, but that's a whole different discussion, and I think it's more of a political discussion than a legal discussion.
Yes, you are very right that it was more political question, because I also wanted to ask you, why do you think that European Union, what is the main reason they're actually changing the course, and this buying European, as you named it, is now actually on the table?
I definitely think it has to do with politics, geopolitics specifically. And I think it's a reaction to partly China moving into or being more and more Chinese companies being more and more present in the EU market, in the internal market. It is also the American First policy, by American, by the way, and I'm going to talk about it tomorrow, goes back to the 1930s. So it's really old, these domestic preferences, but like they have been searches of when it's applied, either there's a crisis, you try to protect your national economy, so the currencies may be weak, and we see different of these reactions, and right now also. So I feel it is a little bit a reaction to what has been happening in the US and China, and that is like Buy European is just one of those, right? We know there's the Foreign Subsidies Directives, there's International Procurement Instrument. There's a lot of these procurement tools that I would say are more geopolitical tools than what we traditionally understood under public procurement.
What are the biggest challenges you are facing right now in the procurement processes in Switzerland?
I think that there's a lot of push towards buying green and implementing buying green, what it means, what are the criteria, how you can do it. There's less focus on corruption, for example. That is not to say that there's none. But so we're coming away from this lowest price idea to quality and sustainability matters. But that, of course, also opens leeway to other things entering, be it nepotism, or I'm just saying, these like threats that the reason why one basically used the lowest price to avoid inequality or difficulties in judging and comparing something. So because we're pushing for sustainability and quality, there might be a space for things and how we deal with that. For example, we had a recent tendered by the Swiss public railways. They were looking for trains, and we have a Swiss company called Stadler Rail. They put in an offer, and then a German company, Siemens Mobility, put in an offer, and Siemens won based on sustainability requirements. That blew some people's minds because, first of all, one would think, or one was thinking that Stadler was doing well on sustainability. And sometimes critics say that sustainability is a protectionist instrument, and it was exactly the opposite of what happened. And so there's like a lot of discussion around sustainability and the Swissness criterion that we have.
What about professionalization? Because this is really big problem in Slovakia, especially also because we have that many mandatory subjects who have to procure. As I mentioned, we have these 3,000 municipalities and all these others parts of the public sector that actually is mandatory using the act. So it is really sometimes very difficult to have this level of the quality that is necessary and needed, and especially because really our law is huge. So we are still trying to improve wherever possible. Even the Public Procurement Office has this as one of their goals. But so far, very slowly, step by step, we are improving.
I agree. It is actually, interestingly, not a big topic, although I think it should be. Because in the empirical studies that I did, there was one finding that federal agencies are better at promoting sustainability than regional. I think it could have to do with expertise that is sometimes just not available at the municipal level. Like when we look at the GPP criteria catalog that the EU has produced, like which municipal procurer knows all of those, and at the same time does tons of other public services aside. Public procurement is oftentimes just part of the job and not the full job. I also found that actually external experts, so we have the possibility in Switzerland to include external experts and have them do the tender or write the tender, if you don't have enough knowledge as a procuring entity, or if you wish one for other reasons. And external experts, the involvement of those actually led to more sustainable contracts. So and then it doesn't answer everything, these the results, but the question then is, well, is it maybe difficult to have an up-to-date understanding and knowledge of all environmental technologies that are on the market? Probably yes, right? They're evolving quickly. There's a lot of innovation happening there, and so I do think that the professionalization should be a topic. I think it's not enough. And so one topic that leads over to this or discussion is also joint procurement, right? If you have like competence centers and procurement entities that work together in procuring, that discussion is also rather quiet or rather small in Switzerland. Maybe because we're such a small country, I don't know, but yeah.
We are even smaller. Is it possible to study public procurement in university in Switzerland?
I'm teaching a course now, so yes, it's possible, at least at our university, but it's not a big thing. I have to agree. There's maybe, to my knowledge, 2 or 3 people who are very active in public procurement academically in Switzerland. There is some diploma studies, or one diploma study that I'm aware of that you can do, and that is often also visited by practitioners. But it's not huge, the education in public procurement in Switzerland.
What do you think, is public procurement more topic for economists or for lawyers?
For both jointly, I think. I have been part of the interdisciplinary symposium on public procurement organized by Gustavo Piga, and he has also a book out there. I think it's called Applied Law and Economics for Public Procurement. I do law and economics. That's basically the empirical legal analysis that I'm doing. So I think it can inform each other, and it's very important to have, if possible, both perspectives in mind, because sometimes I feel like economic models are simplifying the legal environment, and sometimes I feel like regulations are not considering the economic consequences. So I feel like we need both to have a more complete picture.
I know about you that you are an advocate. You were also in the United States, like working in a law office. Did you ever practice public procurement processes for the clients, for example?
So no, I came close to it. I did not in the core, but I did. We were involved. Were part of energy contracts. Had procurement contracts as part of them. That was something where I practiced. And the other thing that I did, I was a law clerk at the Swiss Federal Administrative Court, the supervision body. And there I worked and had public procurement cases. So that was like my practical extent of, yeah.
Can you tell us some interesting cases that come to your mind?
Yes, we have a tunnel because we have a lot of mountains in Switzerland. It's called the January Base Tunnel, and there were a lot of different lots because it was such a huge endeavor to. It was the railway tunnel leading through the mountains, basically similar to the Gotthard Tunnel. If you have heard of that,
of course, I know about Gotthard.
But that one was for trains, so the new one. And there were a lot of different lots, a lot of different contracts. It went on for many years, and therefore also a lot of appeals if something went wrong in the eyes of the bidder or the unsuccessful bidder.
So nothing concrete. It was just a big case. That's what you meant. That's why it meant such.
There were so many different parts that there was like at the beginning there was excavation. They had to dig. There was questions of the floor consistency and dealing with water. And I think they had to drill in a different way than they expected. Of course, that increases costs and increases time. There were then the tracks that were built, and then there was IT and lighting system that had, I think, a couple of appeals. But it was like many large projects. It was unexpected changes that needed to be accommodated within the procurement system. And as we all know, exposed modifications are not the easiest and the most favored topic, or like very critical, let's say, because we don't know what's happening after the award. Yeah.
I would like to go back to the journal you mentioned at the beginning of our conversation. Can you please tell us something more about this journal?
Thank you so much. Yes. So it's the European public procurement and public-private partnership law journal. It has a really long name, so this is why we use the title EPPPL, which doesn't make it much easier with 3 Ps. But that journal, there I became a managing editor after, unfortunately, the passing of our dear colleague Chris Bovis. You might have heard of, yes.
I had Chris Bovis here on the podcast, and it was one of the strongest podcasts we actually held.
No surprise.
He was amazing.
Yes, he was really amazing, and he brought me onto the journal, and I grew up with him. He raised me a little bit into what it means, what the journal does, and so on. And I learned from him, and he's teaching, and he's so knowledgeable, right? And he's also such a good human being.
He was the biggest fan of AI for the future.
Yes, very true. And so it's very difficult to fill those shoes, but it's also a privilege, and we're trying to move the journal along in his thoughts. Of course, I'm a little bit of a different person, but I want to keep this like openness and these various topics. And what we have is we have different country reports and different. For example, Poland, various, I think, Switzerland for sure, that I know, and Germany and UK, and so if someone is interested, also from Slovakia, to contribute,
I'm definitely sure we would very love to contribute, if possible.
Because in every issue, and we have 4 of those each year, there's not only academic articles, but there's always a country report section where the different country reporters would report on different developments in the country. That can be a new law, new legislation, new court decisions, new practice developments. That can be really anything. And so it's really interesting to learn from, for example, we also have, I think Marco wrote on choline, if I'm not mistaken, as part of the country report. So there can be a lot of contribution, and you can look at what's going on in other countries, how they're dealing with certain issues. I think that is very beneficial. We also have a lot of events that are hosted and trainings that are connected to the journal. We have an AI event, upcoming AI in public procurement in spring. There's like some training sessions happening over the summer in Como in Italy. And every year that just was passed, but in March we have Public Procurement Council. That's basically a workshop for everybody for free to join, where different people, this year we were 4, were speaking about important topic at the time. There was, of course, the EU revision. I think it's online. So if you're interested in looking at this, about 4 or 5 hours, we were 4 or 5 people discussing different topics, the revisions, innovation procurement, by European, by Sarah Schoenmakers, Roberto Quaranta on sustainability, sustainable public procurement, and that's accessible for everyone. It's a podcast with video, so to say, and and if the listeners are interested, they should please check it out. And if they're interested in country reports with regard to Slovenia, let me know.
I think the journal really seems like a huge potential inspiration from what you said. I totally understand. You can truly find there some things that you can be inspired, how to even improve processes. So not only the news about what is going on in the procurement world, but also maybe how you can improve your processes. Am I right? Can you get inspiration like this?
I think the good part is that it has also these practice reports, that it's not just academic discussion, but that there are really practical problems that can be discussed too. So it's a little bit, has 2 aspects, and it's like the second one is a bit more down to earth, where you can discuss like practical problems or like professionalization was discussed, things like that are actually relevant in practice. So I think so all the different audience can draw whatever they want. If they're practitioners, they probably rather go to the country reports, and learn something, and the academics might go to academic articles. But I think there's really something for everybody.
Is this your first time in Slovakia?
It is, yes.
Really?
I have to say, yes. Yes, it's sad. I know.
No. I was just curious because Switzerland is not so far away, even though I know you've been living abroad many years.
Yeah, we were almost 10 years in the US and came back a year ago. So we were like dreaming of traveling entire Europe, but we have 2 kids and we work, so we didn't have that much time yet. But we went to Poland last June for a month. With the entire family, and we go to Denmark sometimes because my husband is Danish. But honestly, much further we haven't come yet. I went to Zagreb, yes, for the conference, but unfortunately we traveled less than we wanted to because everything is so close, right, compared to US.
Definitely.
Yeah, and so nice, yeah. We'll go to Romania and summer for a wedding. So,
do you have maybe some last comments you would like to share with our listeners, maybe even regarding the public procurement?
When I think I would like to ask people to distinguish, it might not always be possible, but politics and law. I feel like sometimes these are like public procurement law, I feel like, especially nowadays, has been instrumentalized. And we need to ask ourselves if it's for the better or if it's the right place. Or if public procurement is really like the state buying the best product they can for their people. I feel like this is the main goal, and it has been overloaded with so many things. And I just like urge to question: is this the right tool, and are we going the right way? Just that we stay reflective. Also, when we talk about the revision. My second point is I truly believe in transparency and most importantly in post-award transparency, because I believe only when we have data on how things actually look after completion of the contract, we know whether it was sustainable, whether it was efficient, whether the resources were spent in the way that were tendered or when they were tendered, and whether they went to the places they should have. So that transparency and distinguishing political and legal discussions, that would be my thoughts.
Thank you very much, Désirée, for coming to our podcast. It was really a pleasure to talk to you. You are listening to the podcast of Public Procurement Office with Petra Šupaková. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Petra.
Podcast of the PPO. Podcast about everything from the world of public procurement.